What's happening, fishing friends? Today's video is for all those folks who ask, Debo, what is the best gear ratio for bass fishing? I have a number of individuals who are new to bass fishing reaching out to me saying, Debo, I'm buying a Baitcaster. What speed should I get? I also have folks reach out to me saying, Debo, I bought a 6-to-1 gear ratio reel. Can I fish jigs and frogs, something like that on it? Or did I get the wrong type of reel? Do I need to buy something different to fish those on it? Well, I will tell you all, the best reel speed for bass fishing really boils down to personal preference. You could ask 5 different anglers and there's a very good chance you're going to get 5 different answers as to what each one of those anglers prefers. Now, I do have preferences for reels when it comes to certain applications, lures, and we'll talk about all that in just a minute. But the bigger concern that I want to address first is for all those newer anglers who say, Debo, can I fish a jig on this speed of reel? Or can I still use a frog on this type of gear ratio? Will this specific reel work, or do I need to buy something new? Well, to all you newer folks listening, speed doesn't matter. Now I know, I got a bunch of people staring at the screen right now going, really, Debo? But hear me out. Time on the water and the ability to locate fish are arguably the 2 most important things for a new angler. So if you're someone newer to bass fishing, it's more important for you just to get out and fish than it is to worry about what gear ratio that you've got. So speaking of that gear ratio, what does it really mean on a reel? As you can see here on the Mock Crush, that's a 7.5-to-1 gear ratio. And that simply means that this spool is going to turn around 7.5 times for every 1 complete rotation of the handle. And the gear ratio is going to translate over into IPT, or inches per turn. You'll see that on the box. How much line the reel is going to bring in for every 1 turn of the handle. Now, of course, that's also going to depend on the size of the spool. A bigger spool is going to bring in more line. And how full that spool is. If you have a spool that's only got a little tiny bit of line on it, it's not going to bring in as much as if you have a real full spool. Take, for example, my 2 reels here. Take a look on the top there. The Lose Laser Pro Speed Spool holds 110 yards of 12-pound line. That brings in 30 inches, and that's a 7.5-to-1 gear ratio. Now compare that to the BB1 on bottom. That's 160 yards of 12-pound line. So that holds a lot more line, a larger spool, but it's only bringing in 28 inches, and it's a 6.4-to-1 gear ratio. So that's just something to keep in mind. Hopefully that helps you newer anglers when you're looking at that, understand what those numbers and stuff on the box mean. All right, enough of all the background lingo. Let's talk about high-speed reels. They're all the rage now, right? 8-to-1, 9-to-1, 10-to-1. Some of it may seem kind of crazy, but I do believe a higher speed reel does help for certain situations. I consider the slower speeds the 5 or 6-to-1 reels. Once you're starting to get in the 7, that's kind of a mid-range, but even the higher 7s, to me, are kind of a higher speed reel. And then, of course, the 8, 9, and 10s, those babies are fast. So number 1, the big advantage to me of higher speed reels is when you need to move a bait quicker. Debo, this is groundbreaking information. I know, but hear me out. It does help though. Baits that you need to move quicker, things like a buzz bait on top, a buzz toad on top water, if I want to swim a swim jig really fast. Now, I'm not saying with all those baits you need to go up to a 10-to-1 reel speed. I'm just saying if you've got a 5-to-1 in your arsenal and a 7.5-to-1, you might want to bump up to that 7.5-to-1 for things that need to be moved in quicker. Heck, back in the day when I was learning, a 5-to-1 reel was fast, and my old man used it and fished all the same baits on it. You just had to crank it a lot more. And that's really where that faster reel helps you with those baits. You can fish it on a 5 or you can fish it on a 10. Just means with that 10, you're going to have to make less turns of the handle, less fatigue. Okay, number 2, the second big advantage that I see with higher speed reels is for baits that you want to move with the rod and not the reel itself. Say, for example, if you're pitching a Texas rig into wood, flipping a jig along docks, dragging a jig on a long point, popping a stick bait around grass edges. All those baits are using the rod to move the lure, not the reel. Generally with those type of baits, I'm hunting targets, so a specific dock, a specific tree, a stump. I'm flipping to that target, working it a few times, and then bringing it back. Sometimes I'll swim it and use the reel, but most of the time I'm picking targets and bringing it back. Picking targets, bringing it back. A faster reel is just going to mean that you're wasting less time reeling it in. You're making more casts, more pitches, more presentations, giving you more of an opportunity to catch that fish. Again, is it a requirement? Not at all. You're just going to have to reel quicker to get it back. Now, the third advantage ties closely into number 2, and that's that a faster reel is going to help you bring up all that slack line to get the hook into that fish quicker and get them turned away from cover. If you're flipping around that bush and you're not quite ready for it and you feel that fish and you set the hook and you're all the way back here because you had slack line, where's that fish going to go? Right into the bush. If you'd had that fast reel, a couple cranks may have taken up all that line and that fish wouldn't have got in there. As soon as that fish gets in the wood and brush, there's a good chance you're going to get broke off. And the same goes if you throw a long cast out, that fish grabs it and runs at you, you don't necessarily notice it. It's all the way coming at you, running into the boat. You want to bring up that line as quick as you can because the longer you have slack line, the more of a chance you've got of losing that fish. Now, bringing in all that line quicker also comes into play when you're making long casts. If you're fishing, some sort of topwater or walking bait, or, a plopping toad, frog, something like this. You're making a real long cast trying to cover as much of those pads or grass line as you can. With the treble hook bait, you're not even setting the hook. You're just reeling down into it and pulling. But if that fish grabs it and comes at you, or, moves a different way, you're not quite ready for it. You've got to reel a lot more to get into it and set that hook. And the same goes for frog fishing. If you throw a long frog cast out there and try to set the hook on a frog with slack line, you're not going to get it. You want to have a good solid hook set because you've got two pretty large hooks that you have to get through that fish. So any sort of slack in the line is not going to help you. All right, let's downshift and talk about some of the lower gear ratio reels. To me, again, these are the 5 and 6 to 1 gear ratios. The first big advantage for me, and the reason that I'm going to pick a lower gear ratio reel, is when I want to move the bait slower or at a steady pace. And again, I know, mind-blowing information, Debo, right? You want to move a bait slower, go with a slower reel. If I'm slowly fishing a paddle tail, or I'm slow rolling a spinner bait, whatever it is, something that I want to move slowly, that slower gear ratio helps. Especially if you're someone like me who has a cadence that's usually a little bit quicker. If I'm trying to really slow roll something and keep contact with the bottom, if I've got a 7-5 to 1 gear ratio reel, there's a good chance I'm going to be reeling out too fast and bringing it up, then I got to let it fall. That defeats the whole purpose if I'm trying to drag the bottom with something, or steady roll a paddle tail, or a glide bait, whatever it is you're fishing. You have to match it to the way that you reel. Same goes for if you're fishing a crankbait. You want that crankbait to click off things, carry them, go funny directions, and make that fish react to it. But if you've got a crankbait and you're reeling real fast with it, there's a good chance you're going to be trying to dig a trench. You're going to get that crankbait stuck and lose it. So slower gear ratio helps when you want to move slower. The second big advantage to me of a slower gear ratio reel is when you're fishing lures that have a lot more resistance. You ever throw those lures out there and you're reeling it in and you feel like you're getting a workout just from reeling it in? It's hard to reel. Like, what the heck is on here? You get it up and it's like, oh, it's just this half-ounce spinnerbait. Well, lures like that, a spinnerbait, some chatterbaits can feel that way. If you have a big inline spinner, an A-rig, anything that's got a lot of resistance coming through the water. Even a deep crankbait. I don't get to do deep cranking that much, but it can be a workout. And really, when you're matching a lower gear ratio up with those baits that have more resistance, it's just like downshifting on your motorcycle. When you drive up a hill on your motorcycle, you're downshifting to get more power. You're doing the same thing with a lower gear ratio reel. It's doing less work for every one handle turn. It's easier to bring those baits in. Now, the third big advantage I kind of hit on when I talked about number 1, and that's that you've got to go with the slower gear ratio when you want to move a bait, at a steady pace, and you're somebody that reels fast. It seems like beginners are on each end of the spectrum. I know a lot of people that just start out that just love to crank it. Doesn't matter what it is, they just want to crank that handle. And you've got beginners on the other end of the spectrum that were taught, well, my grandpa said move it slow, so it doesn't matter what they're doing. They're going real slow like molasses with it. So if you're one of those folks that likes to reel really fast, and you've got a bait that you kind of want to move at a moderate pace, a chatterbait, a swim jig, paddle tail, whatever it is, you might be better off going with, like a 6-3 to 1 or, 6-5 to 1, something like that, instead of just picking up an 8 or 9 to 1 reel because you thought the speed looked cool. Everyone's got a natural tempo at which they reel. You've got to match that with the lures that you're using. But again, as I said before, is it 100% necessary? Do you have to have 10 different reels for 10 different lures? Absolutely not. You can have one. I could have this 6-3 to 1 Fuego and fish every single lure in my tackle box on it. Are some things going to be a lot harder? Yeah. Is it going to work a lot better and easier for other things? Certainly will. But again, for all you beginners out there, the biggest, most important thing is use whatever you've got and get out on the water. So overall, my favorite gear ratio is something in the 7-ish to 1 speed. I mean, I can do really anything on this. This is the Lose Speed spool of mine. You've seen this. I've put this thing through the ringer, but it's a 7.5 to 1, and I used it as my frog reel for the longest time. Prior to that, I was throwing, Texas rigs. I would fish spinnerbaits on it. Doesn't matter. It can really do pretty much anything in the spectrum that 7 to 1 speed. So if you're only looking to get one, that's what I would recommend. Again, it's completely personal preference. You ask 500 different people and you're likely to get different answers. But enough listening to Debo blabbing up here. I want to hear from all of you, so leave a comment below and let me know what your favorite all-around gear ratio speed is. It's very interesting. I love hearing all the different perspectives from folks because some guy could be like, I could use an 8.0 to 1 for everything. Doesn't matter what it is. You have people on the other end of the spectrum that, well, a 6 to 1 is the best gear ratio. I love hearing that and I love the conversation. So leave a comment below and let me know what you think. And for any of you beginners out there that have a question about a reel, a speed, what you want to use on it, leave a comment below and let me know. I would love to help you out to the best I can. I'll give you my preference and what my personal opinion would be in hopes that it helps you on your journey. So that is it for me tonight. It is late. I got to get to bed. So until next time.